Science is scary, and sometimes science has the potential to end the entire world. This is a list of experiments that either nearly ended the world or could end the world before you finish watching the video. The Tsunami Bomb. While the world was at war in 1944, New Zealand was at war with the ocean. Exploding thousands of munitions off the coast of Auckland, the New Zealand military wasn't actually trying to rouse Godzilla from its slumber so it could devastate Japan. It was working on something absolutely insane meant to end the war early. The Pacific Allies knew that the stubborn Japanese would not surrender, no matter how unbearable life became for them on their home islands. A near-total naval blockade promised to starve Japan of war materials, but Japan's emperor and military leadership were perfectly ready to let the people actually starve rather than admit defeat. The only alternative would be a horrific invasion of the main island, which would result in millions dead on both sides. While the US worked on a nuclear option to end the war, New Zealand took a more cowabunga direction. Their homegrown superweapon wasn't a weapon at all, but rather a force of nature. Summoning the fury of 1,000 angry waterbenders, New Zealand was developing a way of creating an artificial tidal wave to drown the Japanese islands. As crazy as it was, New Zealand kept the details of Project Seal tightly under wraps for 53 years. The goal was simple. By mapping out underwater terrain, the explosive power of very large bombs would be used to funnel water along a specific path, resulting in an artificial tsunami. The effect would be devastating for any nation with a coastline, but especially so for the Japanese islands, as chains of bombs could set off to create an all-encompassing tsunami that hit the nation from all sides at once. To test the theory, the military began testing just off the coast of Auckland. These tests, however, were smaller scale, mostly to test if water could be funneled in the desired direction through the sheer force of explosives. The tests proved that there were some difficulties with the concept, with the water reluctant to move horizontally and thus create a desired wave. However, they managed to create miniature tidal waves at Vangaparaoa in 1944 and 1945. New Zealand alerted its ally, the United States, to the project's potential. America saw an opportunity to waterbend through the use of high explosives and immediately liked what it heard, prompting the Pentagon to become extremely interested. After all, what New Zealand didn't know was that the US was working on its own explosive, one big enough to generate the power needed to potentially create a tsunami. Unfortunately for surfing aficionados everywhere, but fortunately for the people of Japan, Project Seal never met with real success during the war years. However, the US military would note that if the project had been more successful, the US would have heavily considered its implementation alongside the use of nuclear weapons to end the war. However, while Project Seal didn't deliver the hoped-for results during the war, both the US and Britain were keen to pursue it in the aftermath of the war. So much so that they even considered sending the head of the New Zealand project to witness the US nuclear tests at Bikini Atoll to see if it inspired his research in any way. Instead, though, the US sent one of its own scientists to New Zealand after the Bikini Atoll tests, along with all relevant technical data gathered, to share it with the Project Seal team. From here, the project fell into obscurity, and the details of further research have never been made public. However, the US continued to show a keen interest in Project Seal long after the end of World War II. So, how could Project Seal have ended the world? Well, today we know that creating artificial tsunamis with nuclear weapons is extremely possible. In fact, the Russians claim to have a weapon that can do just that. Then again, you should take any statement made by the Russian government with a Dead Sea's amount of salt. We're not saying they're prolific liars, we're just saying they're aggressively allergic to the truth. But Project Seal would have needed nuclear weapons to make it work, and at that point it's just a whole lot easier to drop them on your enemy's head than to go through the trouble of tossing them in the ocean at the proper depth and proper location to do pretty much the same thing. The proliferation of nuclear weapons by the US and USSR made Project Seal completely unnecessary. The key to Project Seal's doomsday potential, though, comes from the use of conventional explosives. If those crazy Kiwis had figured out how to make tsunamis with nothing more than conventional explosives, then that would open up the possibility of drowning out entire coastlines of any nation with just a few $1 million to spare on bombs. Right now, the end of the world is only feasible for a few nations armed with nukes, but Project Seal could have democratized the apocalypse by making it accessible to everyone. Von Neumann machines inside your body. We bet most of you like having a body. Well, how would you like to have more of it? We don't mean gaining a few pounds, we mean literally having more of your body, to the point of bursting. In 2023, scientists at New York University took a break from inventing an even worse type of pizza to experiment with nanomachines. These machines are microscopic and represent a brand new field of technology at the nanoscale, small enough to directly interact with molecules and even DNA itself. The possibilities are incredible, and many envision a future human having their bodies full of self-replicating nanomachines that can manufacture pretty much anything the body needs out of raw materials. One such application is the internal manufacture of medicines. So instead of going to the hospital to pay $2,000 for a badly needed prescription, you instead just pay a $2,000 subscription fee to that same hospital and make it yourself from the comfort of your own home. But these machines can do more than just create life-saving drugs inside your body. They can even help repair damage to tissue by acting as scaffolding and then creating new tissue from the foods you digest. In the future, hospitals may only be needed for the worst of emergencies, and with nanobots on patrol inside your body, you'll handle most recuperative tasks at home, and much faster than currently possible. A broken bone may take only a week to heal, versus the months it can take now. There are other astounding applications as well, specifically when it comes to aging. Currently, it's understood that aging is the direct result of DNA beginning to reproduce more and more errors, as it's copied over and over again. But what if you could program nanomachines made out of strands of DNA to replicate properly and indefinitely with machine precision? It might be possible to stop aging in its tracks, at least till you accidentally visit a suspicious website on the brain internet and download some malware, and your nanobots turn you into a monster. The nanomachines created by New York University's researchers were made of just 4 strands of DNA, measuring 100 nanometers. The nanobots were then suspended in a solution of raw materials to build more DNA strands, and they were able to arrange those raw strands of DNA into more copies of themselves. As with any self-replication, or von Neumann machine, these DNA bots have the capability to exponentially replicate. If the first nanobot makes a copy, then on round 2 there will be 4, by round 3 there's 8, and so on and so on. Previous efforts had created 2D shapes from raw materials, which would then have to be folded into a 3D shape and could lead to copying errors. But this new development will allow for the creation of 3D shapes from scratch, significantly eliminating the chance of error. Per Andrew Surman of King's College in London, assembling these kinds of things is tricky, and how things are folded up, both in synthetic things that we make and in biomolecules, is really important. When things are folded wrong, they don't work. Turns out that creating working molecules isn't like your dresser drawer. Things have to be folded properly, or you accidentally end up turning yourself into a Resident Evil nightmare monster. Currently, the technology is limited to the lab and not quite ready to be injected into the human body. So far, this process has required specific DNA chains and organic molecules, as well as gold nanorods and the precise application of heating, cooling, and UV light. The UV light is used to permanently weld the nanobots together, while the heating is used to separate the copied structure from the original. Thus, scientists tell us that this technology can't work outside of laboratory conditions. Yet, there are a lot of examples of technology that initially only worked under laboratory conditions, things like 3D printing or special stealth coatings used on aircraft. Yet in time, we've seen these technologies spread outside of the laboratory, to the point that they're ubiquitous. Games Workshop may still price miniatures like 3D printers don't exist, but everybody knows somebody who has one in their garage today. And what could possibly go wrong with nanomachines that can directly manipulate your DNA and replicate exponentially? Well, it turns out that any self-replicating technology is pretty much the single most dangerous thing we could ever invent. Even more dangerous than nuclear weapons. Nanobots that manipulate DNA could self-replicate out of control and spread like a plague, reforming all DNA across the planet in their own image. It would leave Earth looking kinda like that one vault in Fallout full of Garys. Only what'll actually be left behind is potentially unrecognizable masses of undulating flesh that covers the entire planet like a meat carpet. Basically, it's an Akira situation. Advancements in nanomachines that can self-replicate exist outside of the body as well. Self-replicating machines have a plethora of industrial uses, potentially leading to the creation of truly amazing materials. But if someone installs Windows as the operating system on those bots, one error could end up with them turning all matter on Earth into a copy of themselves. Known as gray goo, this hypothesized apocalyptic scenario results in the Earth not just being covered but converted into a massive ball of gray goo. The gray goo being the trillions of nanomachines all descended from one single rogue nanobot. All matter from plant and animal life to minerals would become goo. This scenario is so terrifying that there is a theory by many involved in the search for extraterrestrial life that self-replicating nanomachines could be a universally banned technology. Given the age of the universe and how late humans are to the game, there's a strong possibility that there already exists a number of incredibly advanced species. These hyper-intelligent aliens could recognize the threat nanomachines pose and have agreed to enforce a universal ban on any use of the tech. After all, one single outbreak could spread across the galaxy by a simple asteroid strike, similar to the panspermia hypothesis that states the seeds of life could be spread from planet to planet, or even between star systems in a similar fashion. We know it's possible because there have been numerous Mars meteorites located on the Earth itself, and one that might hint at the possibility of life having hitched along for the ride. So, aliens could be monitoring us right now and waiting to reveal themselves the moment we start getting too dangerous with our technology. A runaway von Neumann event could replicate a galactic hazard so great that any efforts to create these machines might mandate immediate action, possibly even outright extermination. After all, aliens might decide that if we're too stupid to recognize the danger of self-replicating nanomachines on our own, we're probably too stupid to be trusted to develop other similarly destructive technologies. And given how many people still believe the Earth is flat, they're probably right. Virtual reality. Wait, how could virtual reality destroy actual reality? Well, it's much easier than you might think, and the good news is that we're already headed in that direction. Today, virtual reality is pretty hit and miss, at least in the VR systems available for home use. Devices like Oculus often leave people with motion sickness, and VR-exclusive games aren't exactly winning Game of the Year just yet. Apple's new augmented reality glasses struggle to find any real usefulness outside of immediately outing who your never-been-kissed virgins are in the neighborhood. At the moment, virtual or augmented reality is a novelty, and few people are willing to pay the hefty prices that these devices currently command. But console and PC gaming once found itself in a similar situation. Some of you in the audience might be old enough to remember when PC games were sold on floppy disks, stuffed into plastic baggies, and hanging off a rack in the office supply store. You might even remember the original kings of video gaming, titles like Wizardry, Ultima, King's Quest, Loom, and Might and Magic. Fast forward a few short decades and now not only is video gaming a trillion-dollar industry, it's actually cool to be a gamer. At this point, we'd like to tell anyone under 35 in the audience that they need to thank the first over 35 person they see next. These guys and gals laid down on the barbed wire so you could step over their corpses. Virtual reality is promising to head in the same direction as mainstream gaming, and eventually you'll be getting made fun of by your space grandkids for playing video games on a screen like a dinosaur. The appeal is universal. Life sucks. It honestly is the most awful thing ever invented. But a virtual life can take all the parts that suck about real life and conveniently edit them out, or at least let you blast them in the face with a shotgun. Going to the beach? Sure, that's okay at best. There's sunburn, the sand is going to literally get everywhere and rash you up. And then there's the sharks. By the way, were you aware that great white sharks have been routinely tracked in the Mediterranean? Have fun with that fact the next time you go to the beach, Europeans. And Americans, who doesn't love a day out at the lake or river? Well, bull sharks definitely do. They've been tracked as much as 1,000 miles inland due to their ability to regulate their salt levels. But imagine going to that beach in a virtual reality setting. No sharks, no sand rashes, no sunburn. Plus, future tech promises to make the fake beach feel exactly like the real beach. Elon Musk's Neuralink has just successfully tested its first implant in a human brain. The test subject, Nolan Arbaugh, suffered a spinal injury 8 years ago that left him as a quadriplegic. He volunteered for Neuralink's trial out of a desire to help development of a technology that could prove revolutionary for not just people like him, but the whole world. Instead of turning Arbaugh into a programmable assassin, the implant allowed him to manipulate a computer simply by thinking about what he wanted to do. By focusing on where he wanted the mouse cursor to go, it would move to where he was looking and execute functions like clicking. Per Arbaugh, the first time that he was given free rein over the implant, he used it to play an all-night session of Civilization VI, staying up till 6 a.m. This is an incredible breakthrough and a heartwarming story. Before this implant, Arbaugh was unable to play his favorite game, as he required a friend to input all the commands, proving entirely too tedious and too time-consuming. And yet, in Arbaugh's joy and Neuralink's success, we find roots of how virtual reality is going to destroy the world. Imagine Neuralink develops to the point that it can not just allow for brain-to-computer interfacing, but actually stimulate the brain to create specific sensations. Imagine if via a simple electric stimulation of different parts of the brain, Neuralink or a device like it could cause the brain to experience a sensation of touch or smell. Now imagine coupling that with the ability to perfectly simulate any environment you want. Suddenly, you can feel the warm sun on your skin and the sand. Only the sand is programmed to not go into the places you'd rather keep sand-free. You can smell the salt spray, and if you want to, you can touch that great white shark constantly on patrol right off the shore of any real-world Mediterranean beach. We mean any beach, by the way. You can touch the sharks because they're programmed not to mercilessly rip you to pieces. But it gets better. You can also breathe underwater and see in pitch black, so you can explore to your heart's content. Are you the forever alone type? Not to worry. With a premium DLC package, you can make your own AI-powered girlfriend, completely indistinguishable from a real one, to join you on these adventures as long as you stay logged in. And here we get to the crux of the world-ending problem, because if you have a perfect life at your fingertips, why would you ever choose the real world over that one? Sure, some purists will prefer to wake up at 7 a.m., spend an hour in traffic, 8 hours plus 1 hour of overtime on a slave-wage job, another hour in traffic only to come home and realize that we live in a dystopia where you'll never own a home and a single medical emergency will financially end you. Meanwhile, the rest of us will be slaying dragons in fantasy worlds where we're the hero and we're dating Joel Miller from The Last of Us because he has real daddy vibes, or Triss Marigold from The Witcher because she is straight-up wifey material. The fact is, children yearn for the digital minds, hence why Minecraft is a global bestseller. Why spend your time in the boring real world where you're powerless when you could be the main character for real in a perfect digital world? This situation is so dire that scientists who study the possibility of alien life have even theorized that virtual reality could be a great filter event. A great filter event is an attempt at explaining why, despite the predicted abundance of habitable planets and a universe that's over 13 billion years old, we don't see any evidence of alien civilizations. Any civilization remotely following our own development path should have colonized the entire galaxy if they were born even just a few million years before us. And yet, when we look at the night sky, we see and we hear no evidence of intelligent life anywhere. Great filter events are thus predicted to be moments in a civilization's development, or galactic events, that act as a filter and destroy a civilization before it can spread far enough to be resilient to further great filter events. Examples include the asteroid that mod-banned the dinosaurs straight off Earth's server. But some predicted great filters are the development of nuclear weapons, or even the development of prokaryotic life to eukaryotic life. Virtual reality is one of these hypothesized filters, with the basic thesis being that at some point in a civilization's development, virtual life becomes more attractive than real life, and birth rates along with social development stagnate, then plummet dramatically. Think this is far-fetched? The entire First World is currently experiencing this phenomenon, with birth rates in an alarming number of developed countries on the decline, while the rest mostly stagnant. Nations like Japan, South Korea, and China are all facing an uncertain future and a population collapse in the coming decades, thanks to very low birth rates, though China has additional factors at play, like the disastrous one-child policy of its recent past. The fact is that as standards of life improve, people postpone having children. Upwards mobility incentivizes individuals to put off having children until later in life, where both men and women might not be as fertile as they once were. But there's also a general decline in interest in having a large family. If you have a high standard of living, you want to preserve it, and with the cost of living steadily increasing and wages not keeping pace since the 1970s, people simply cannot afford to have the required 2.5 children or so to keep a population going. For many, though, it comes down to a simple choice of prioritizing their personal enjoyment of life over having children. And this is the problem posed by advanced virtual reality. If you're living your best digital life slaying dragons and romancing Joel Miller, again totally daddy vibes, why would you ever want to sabotage that by having children? A predicted response to a decline in births is an increase in automation, with nations like China and Japan already taking very serious looks into how artificial intelligence and robotics can fill in for the millions of jobs that need doing, but neither nation will have the population to do them in just a few short decades. At some point, humanity might just decide it prefers to live fully in its digital worlds and hand stewardship of the planet over to intelligent machines, a scenario known as wandering dreamers, posits that there may be entire alien civilizations who exist in fully digital worlds, and their bodies are stored inside of space structures or hollowed-out asteroids that orbit bright stars to harvest the solar energy. And to be honest, one look at the real world, and we can hardly blame them. Green energy. Don't worry, we're not claiming that windmills cause cancer or a bird apocalypse, but the pursuit for green energy has led humanity to push the boundaries of science, and in the 1990s, the quest to go green nearly turned the world into a desert. 1990s. The global economy is booming, and NATO has won history forever by forcing the Soviet Union to cry uncle. Russia would never threaten global peace ever again, but Germany had a problem. Not only did German scientists foresee the climate crisis we're currently in the opening phases of, but they had a lot of wood waste from commercial logging and farming lying around. So much so that they needed a solution, and German bioengineers got a great idea. Why not turn that wood waste into clean burning ethanol? Trash to fuel was environmentally friendly and could turn a tidy profit too, while taking a big bite out of the global carbon emissions. To convert wood waste, corn stalks, and other agricultural waste byproducts into sweet euros, the Germans enlisted the help of a small bacterium called Klebsiella. Typically, this bacteria can lead to nasty infections that cause pneumonia, meningitis, and UTIs, to name just a few. But with a little biohacking, scientists could fix God's terrible mistake and turn Klebsiella from a zero to a hero. A new genetically engineered strain of bacterium was thus produced with an appetite for agricultural waste byproducts, and in return, the bacteria would produce ethanol. The bacteria was a big success, and the waste product left over after the ethanol was removed could be simply added back to the soil. It was cheap, effective, and environmentally friendly. The perfect combination. Thankfully for all life on Earth, though, the company sought out the approval from Oregon State University before moving the bacteria to market. During testing, the post-processed waste was added to living soil, which was then planted with various seeds. All of them grew and began to sprout. Great success all around. Until the plants all started to die shortly after sprouting. And when new seeds were planted, they died, exactly like their forefathers. Now researchers grew suspicious and began to take a look at the soil. What they discovered horrified them. It turns out that the genetically engineered bacteria had basically outcompeted all native soil microorganisms. This included a special fungus called mycorrhizae, which lives in the soil and helps plant roots absorb nutrients from said soil. The Klebsiella bacteria had killed off so much of the fungi that the plants had literally starved to death, unable to absorb enough nutrients to live. This was a troubling discovery, but it soon got much worse. As scientists worked to discover how Klebsiella was attacking helpful fungi, they made another bone-chilling discovery. The bacterium had become extremely resilient to environmental and other effects, and was able to live in infected soil for extremely long periods of time. It was then that they realized that one single lab breach could have resulted in an infection that would have been impossible to stop. Within a matter of years, Klebsiella could have spread around the world, and shortly after that, all plant life on Earth could have been eradicated. The results were so shocking that the Environmental Protection Agency stepped in, sure that the nerds over at Oregon State had made an error. They poured through the entire research effort and discovered no fault on the nerds' behalf, and the German company's request to move the bacterium to market was promptly canceled. German bioengineers have since then only been allowed to work on developing more delicious pretzels, with most scientists agreeing that there is little chance that pretzels could turn the world into a biological wasteland. But hey, here's to hoping. Global bioengineering efforts, though, continue to this day and are actually accelerating. While genetically engineered crops are ubiquitous by now and pose no known health risks, scientists continue to poke Pandora's box by attempting to engineer microorganisms for the benefit of humanity. With these efforts under pressure to make money for investors, all it takes is one single moment of lax oversight for the entire planet to undergo a genetically engineered man-made apocalypse. But the good news is that companies and governments have never, ever, not even once, placed profit over safety. Geoengineering. This year, Dubai drowned in rain, and many believe it was man's fault. Normally, the crowning jewel in the desert, built on the back of modern slave labor, receives only 3.9 inches of rainfall a year, though there are occasional extreme downpours. However, as Dubai's population grows and seeks to attract more people to live there, the United Arab Emirates has taken to utilizing cloud seeding to generate more rain. In just one 24-hour period, nearly a foot of rain fell, over 3 times the annual average. Yet, there's a theory that cloud seeding was the cause. seeding aircraft had been operational only 2 days before the storm, and thus it's believed that the UAE's cloud seeding likely played only a minor role in what was essentially a freak storm system helped along by man in another way: global warming. By now, it should be obvious that global warming is real, and if you still doubt it, then do the world a favor and just get on the first school bus you see tomorrow morning. Per degree Celsius of warming, the atmosphere can hold as much as 7% more water. When you're talking trillions of gallons of water per storm, that's a significant figure, and the world is feeling the effects right now. Record-breaking flooding comes on the back of record-breaking fires year after year, and it's only going to get worse. We recently got to speak with the scientist who was the first to discover the hole in the ozone layer last century, and when asked about global warming, he said, quote, "I can say it now that I'm retired. We're fucked." On that optimistic note, humanity has decided that it's going to do everything it can to reduce the effects of global warming, except, stop doing the thing that causes global warming. It's known as geoengineering, and the good news is that it's got a better than even chance of ending the world. We're already seeing geoengineering in cloud seeding, which takes place everywhere from the United States to the UAE and India. The technique is not new, and it's been used for decades now. While there are various methods of delivery, the most common is an aircraft, which disperses an agent that can act as a nuclei for water to cling to. This creates artificial rain or snow, depending on the location and the agent used. Sounds great, right? Rain on demand. What could possibly go wrong with man usurping the natural rhythm of the planet? Well, for starters, there is the seeding agents themselves. There's been a switch lately to a more tame substance like salt, but silver iodide remains a popular choice, a highly toxic one at that. Dispersed over a wide enough area, seeding chemicals have been shown to pose little risk to human or animal health. But the problem comes when they become concentrated, thanks to runoff. Studies by the American Environmental Protection Agency have shown that there is little impact on the environment in the areas of the U.S. where seeding takes place. But America's geography is not the world's, and some scientists are showing concern over routine seeding in places like Dubai. The concentration of seeding chemicals can grow to concerning levels over time, especially if runoff water is funneled into a smaller geographic area. There's also a disruption of the natural water cycle. The rain or snow that seeding generates over a target location isn't free, it's moisture that would have continued accumulating and traveling across the earth until it rained down somewhere else. Sometimes it can be hard to predict where that rain would actually fall, but as droughts intensify thanks to global warming, tensions around the world are rising. Iran already blames Turkey for stealing its rain, prompting a social media protest in 2024 after pictures showing large clouds in Turkey versus an empty sky over Iran spread across social media. The Middle East is rife with tensions, and despite it being unpredictable where seeded water may have ended up, the perception that countries are stealing water from another country in a deep drought like Iran could provoke violent conflict. Then there's plans to directly influence the temperature of the planet. Because while men will do literally anything but go to therapy, mankind will literally do anything to address this climate change but stop using fossil fuels. Just imagine how sad it would make all those oil and coal executives. One plan to cool the planet is to create a massive shade in space. That sounds pretty extreme, but there's more than enough material in the solar system to easily manufacture a shade large enough to screen some of the sunlight hitting the Earth. This plan would take time to implement, and there are technological barriers to overcome, but they're in no way insurmountable, and a shade could be built in as little as 50 years. But what if something happens to the shade before it gets into its proper position? Too close to the Earth, and the shade would cover the planet unevenly, creating hot spots around the edges, where the shadow from the shade doesn't cover the planet. This would generate uneven heating, which in turn could create massive weather systems that spell disaster for humanity. If the shade's thickness isn't properly calculated, it could either end up being a massive boondoggle that barely has an effect on the planet, or go the other way and screen out too much light from the sun, slashing global temperatures dramatically and maybe even prompting a new ice age. The risks are small, but they are never zero. There are even more crazier proposals for combating climate change without having to make oil and coal executives sad, and the risks only grow from there. Personally, our favorite plan is the tried and true method of simply dropping a massive asteroid made of ice into the ocean. Now go check out Freaky Experiments That Almost Ended the World Part 1, or click this other video instead.